My husband cheated on me with my sister, and I just now learned the horrible truth. There was a third person behind it all, watching our every move. My name is Amy and I am 29 years old. I never thought my life would turn into such a nightmare. It all started almost a year ago, but every time I think about it, my heart still feels like it's in my throat. My husband, Jason, and I had been together for 7 years, married for 4. On the surface, we had a normal life. Work, a small apartment in the suburbs, weekends together, the occasional evening get-together with friends. I always thought we trusted each other, that we were honest and open. My sister, Kate, lives in the same city. We have been close since childhood, and I never thought she would ever betray me so deeply. At first, I started noticing the little things. Jason started staying late at work longer, even though his schedule was actually the same. He would hide his phone, switched to another topic when I accidentally glanced at his screen. I tried to convince myself that these were the usual little secrets, boring work matters, stress, or just personal space. But gradually it began to feel different, and I began to notice that Kate was acting strange too. She would show up spontaneously without warning, sometimes staying late, sometimes staying the night. And these visits always coincided with the times Jason was supposed to be out. Everything in my head was spinning as I began to put these little details together. There were calls she would pick up in another room, text messages she would hide, moments when I just felt something was wrong but couldn't find any evidence. And I tried to ignore it because I didn't want to believe that they could betray me like that at the same time. I always thought that the people I loved most couldn't hurt me like that. I tried to focus on work, on my friends, on my daily life. But this feeling of rot inside me grew with each passing day. Then there were moments that I now remember with disgust and bitterness, catching their glances when they thought I wasn't looking. I noticed their subtle smiles at each other, their casual touches that seemed normal to me, but now in my memory looked like clear signs that I was deceiving myself. And all this lasted for a whole year. A whole year when I lived next to them, observed their behavior, saw how they pretended that everything was normal. But in fact, they were ruining my life with every meeting, every secret. The scariest thing was the realization that I saw these signs, and my subconscious understood that something was wrong, but I rejected it because I could not believe that my sister and husband were capable of such things. I tried to look for explanations. Maybe these were just stupid mistakes, fleeting flirtations. No, it was much deeper, systematic, and it became clear when I accidentally saw the correspondence between them. At first, I did not believe my eyes. I reread the messages several times, trying to convince myself that this was some kind of joke, that I misunderstood something. But every word, every phrase was like a knife stab straight into the chest. I tried not to scream, not to cry, not to show that I knew, because I needed to figure out what to do next. Only one thing was spinning in my head. How could they hide this for so long? How could my sister stoop so low? How could my husband, the man I loved and trusted, ruin our lives so thoughtlessly? I tried to survive in this reality, pretending that everything was okay, but every day I was losing a part of myself, a part of the trust in the people I loved the most. I wrote down my thoughts so as not to go crazy, tried to sort through the events in my head, analyze every moment. I looked through photographs, remembered our moments together, and now they looked different, like part of the illusion they built for me. I even tried to talk to Kate, asked about the oddities, noticed her nervous movements in response, but she always skillfully avoided the topic. I tried to be strong, tried to hold on for myself, but the feeling of betrayal was enormous, oppressive, depriving me of sleep and appetite. I understood that this was not just cheating. This was a betrayal that affected my entire life, all my relationships, and even my perception of the world. And now, sitting alone in our apartment, I understand that this year has not only changed my life, it has destroyed everything I knew about trust and love. Every sound, every look seems suspicious. Every laugh seems false. I'm trying to figure out how to live on, how to rebuild myself after the two closest people to me betrayed me simultaneously and systematically for an entire year. But for now, all I have is a cold feeling of emptiness, fear and bitterness that will never go away completely. A day passed, but there was no peace. I walked around the apartment, not understanding where my body ends and thoughts begin, where consciousness ends and the abyss of fear and betrayal begins. And then something happened that I did not expect at all. I decided to check their phones. I know it seems crazy, but the inner voice that did not give me peace led me to this. I knew that if I could find anything new, I'd be ready to talk, at least emotionally. I picked up Jason's phone under the guise of showing him something on his app. The screen lit up, and I stumbled upon a folder of photos that definitely shouldn't be there. My heart leapt. They were photos, but not just photos of them together. There were screenshots of their text messages, moments that clearly took place outside the house, and something strange that I couldn't immediately place. In the chaos, I saw one message that literally froze my blood. It was addressed to Kate, and it began, "I'm sorry Amy will never know, but..." And then I stopped because after those words came a strange signature, the name of another person I never expected to see in this story. Another person. I couldn't believe my eyes. As I tried to figure out what that meant, I discovered even more. They didn't seem to be acting alone. Someone else was involved in this web of lies, someone watching, directing, somehow participating. Suddenly, my year of suffering seemed more complicated than I could have imagined. I took a step back, my legs shaking. I tried to remember all the little details, the odd hints, the moments that had seemed insignificant but now formed a frightening puzzle. I saw messages flying back and forth between them and the other person, how they arranged meetings, ways to avoid my attention. I felt the panic rising at a furious pace, but with it came a strange clarity. This was no longer just an affair between my sister and her husband. It was a carefully orchestrated game, and I was the last one to know. I sat on the floor, holding my phone, trying to make sense of the chaos. I tried to remember who else might have been involved, which friends or coworkers might know and keep quiet. But the worst thing was the realization that throughout this entire year, I had been completely blind, completely trusting the people who were destroying me step by step. I began to read their messages in more detail, every word, every reaction. And the more I read, the clearer it became that Jason and Kate were building not just a secret relationship, but some kind of control system, where I was just a spectator, whom they were gradually pushing out of their little reality. At some point, I noticed something that turned everything upside down. There was a message from Jason to a third person, where he mentioned that he felt guilty, that this could go too far, and that Amy is too smart not to notice. Fear and rage mixed, because suddenly I understood. They knew that I could understand, but they deliberately acted in such a way that I remained ignorant. They played with my mind. I could not hold back the tears, but at the same time, determination was growing inside me. I realized that if I wanted to change something, I couldn't just get angry. I had to act. I took screenshots of all the evidence, carefully saved them to a separate drive, and hid them. Every time I reread those messages, I felt a mixture of horror and strength. Horror for what they had done, and strength because I now had an understanding of the whole picture. That evening, I sat with my phone, thinking about how to face the truth. But what I found only made my life more confusing. I began to search for information about the third person, trying to understand his motives and connections. And the more I dug, the more questions arose, and the answers seemed terrifying. I felt like I was on the edge, where every step could destroy the remains of my reality, or, conversely, give me a chance to control my own life. I knew that talking to Jason and Kate would be inevitable, but now I had not just a betrayal, but a whole web of lies to deal with. And I felt that if I did everything right, I could at least get a part of myself back, a part of my world. I barely slept that night. I thought about everything. The year of deception, the people I loved, and how they could hide the truth for so long, what was yet to come. I knew that my life would never be the same again, that the trust I once thought was unbreakable was shattered. But with that came the knowledge that I had control now. I had knowledge that could change the course of events. And somewhere deep inside me, for the first time in a long year, I felt like I could fight, that I could at least try to rebuild myself and my life after learning the terrible, twisted truth that was more betrayal than I could have ever imagined. I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. Every day in that house was torture. Seeing them, hearing their voices, feeling their gazes that I knew were not aimed at me, but aimed at hiding the truth. I sat in the kitchen, phone in hand, thinking about what to do next. At first, I thought about a direct confrontation, about simply demanding the truth from Jason and Kate. But I knew they would lie, they would try to justify themselves, they would use my doubts against me. That would never give me closure, I knew that. Then the idea came to me. If I couldn't get them to confess in person, I would force it out into the open. I wasn't thinking about revenge. That was too petty. That would be for someone else. I needed to free myself, clear my head, expose the truth to a world that could somehow understand it. I started making a plan. I decided that first I needed to gather all the evidence in one place. Screenshots of texts, photos, notes I'd taken when I was trying to prove to myself that this wasn't my paranoia. Everything had to be flawless. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. I couldn't allow Jason and Kate to manipulate me again. Once I had everything together, I started writing. For myself first, then to people I trusted, friends, family, a few close friends. I described the events, tried to convey my feelings, described how this web of lies gradually unraveled, how I discovered the third person, and how they had been building this system of deception for an entire year. I did not want to humiliate them. Although sometimes rage got the better of me, I wanted the truth, transparent and clear. I paused, rereading the text. Everything inside me was shaking, tears blurred my eyes, my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. I understood that after sending this letter, my life would never be the same. I pressed send and immediately felt a strange relief, as if part of a huge burden had been lifted from my shoulders. The reaction was not long in coming. Friends wrote, called, expressed support, gave advice, asked how I was feeling. For me, it was the first time in a long year that I felt like I wasn't alone, that someone was seeing the truth I'd carried inside for so long. But Jason and Kate's reaction was unexpected. They started sending messages, soft at first, then more harsh. They tried to intimidate me, to convince me that I was exaggerating, that I didn't understand the situation, that it was different. I held on. I read their words and understood that I was now in control, not them. I was the one who knew who had done what, who held the cards. Over time, I began to receive responses from people I hadn't expected. Jason's friends, Kate's acquaintances, colleagues. They wrote, shared their observations, confirmed my suspicions, told me details I couldn't have known. Each new response was like a small victory, proof that the truth was coming out. Sometimes I would sit alone at night and reread these letters, and for the first time in a long year I felt alive. I realized that I had not only exposed a deception, but also regained some control over my life, my power over someone who had tried to destroy me. It was scary. It was painful, but also liberating. Sometimes it occurred to me that my sister and husband might have thought that I would break, that I would remain silent and bury my head in the sand like before. But now I knew that their plan had failed, that the truth always finds a way out, even if it takes strength, patience, and endurance. And now, sitting at the table with my laptop, looking through people's responses, I understood that this year has changed me, but it has not broken me. I am stronger than ever. And although the pain is not yet gone, although trust still needs to be restored, I know one thing. I can survive betrayal, I can cope with deception, and I can be myself, even if the world around me has turned upside down. And the strangest thing is that through this public step, through revealing the whole truth, I felt like for the first time in a long year I was breathing again. A couple of days after I sent the letters and told everyone what I knew, I received a message from a person I never expected to see in this story. It arrived in my personal inbox, where I usually didn't check anything important. The sender's name was unfamiliar, but something about the letter immediately caught my attention. The style, the wording, the cold-blooded precision with which the message was composed. At first, I thought it was one of Jason's or Kate's friends who had decided to intervene to hush up the situation. But as soon as I read the first lines, I realized that this was on a whole other level. The letter said that they knew about what had happened, that they had observed and even indirectly participated, but they had never wanted me to find out in this form. And then came the explanation. The third person was someone from their circle who had initially helped them hide their meetings, directed their correspondence, given advice on how to keep everything unnoticed. And then I felt something inside me collapse and at the same time take shape. All my ideas about what was happening were partially wrong. This wasn't just a betrayal by my husband and sister. It was a system that someone from the outside had helped them build, carefully and purposefully. Reading this letter was like looking at my life through a crack. I saw familiar events, but in a new light. Every moment when I noticed strange looks, secret calls and messages, was now associated not only with them, but also with the fact that someone was deliberately directing their actions, creating for me the illusion that I was blind. The author of the letter claimed that the intervention was more of an observer's role, that they did not want anyone to get hurt physically or emotionally, but recognized that consequences were inevitable. At first, I felt angry and confused. How can you play with people's emotions like that? How can you build intricate scenarios of betrayal, including other people, and think that this is acceptable? But gradually, a strange clarity appeared in me. Now I saw that the story was more complex than just a personal betrayal, and that the truth was multi-layered, confusing, almost like a game of chess. I reread all my notes, screenshots, and emails again, and finally realized that I could now act consciously, with the full picture. I realized that if I wanted to change anything, I needed to understand not only Jason and Kate's motives, but also the role of this third person. I began corresponding with him cautiously, testing how much I could trust the information he was giving. He shared details that confirmed my worst assumptions about how they planned to hide the truth, but he also gave unexpected explanations. Why they chose these methods, who gave the advice, why some things seemed incredible to me. Each new fact added shock, but at the same time gave a tool for understanding. And then, sitting at night with my laptop and rereading this correspondence, I realized one thing. This story is not about one husband and one sister. It is a story about trust, deception, and manipulation on several levels. And now, I have the opportunity to act in a way that will take back control and not just exist as a victim. I began to understand the psychology of what was happening, why Jason and Kate were doing what they were doing, and how their behavior was part of a larger game that targeted me. And the more I learned, the more my resolve grew. I now knew that being open and telling the truth could ruin their plans entirely. I no longer felt alone. Yes, the pain was still there, and the betrayal still weighed on me, but now I had a path. I could act rationally, strategically, rather than emotionally, which was incredibly empowering after a long year of fear and doubt. The letters from the third person allowed me to not only comprehend the scale of what was happening, but to prepare the next step, a way to end this story in a way that would allow me to emerge alive, whole, and honorable. And for the first time in a long year, I felt like I could breathe deeply, that I could take back control of my life and expose the betrayal fully, without being a prisoner of someone else's games. Now I knew that the truth was multi-layered, and my role in this story was not to be a mere observer, but to act. I knew this day would come. Months of fear, tears, and late-night musings had led to one goal: to see all three of them face to face and demand the truth. I no longer wanted to live in the shadow of deception, in constant anxiety, where every glance from Jason and every smile from Kate seemed like a trap. It took days to prepare. I reviewed all the correspondence, notes, photographs. I studied all the little details that had previously seemed random to me: the timing of calls, the coincidence of visits, the tone of the messages. I knew that any little thing could be used against me, so I collected all the evidence in one place and prepared copies in case they tried to deny anything or manipulate me. We met in a neutral apartment that I had rented for the day. I asked them to come together, without excuses, without running away. At first they tried to joke, tried to change the tone of the conversation, but I held on, quietly, evenly, with cold attention. I turned on my laptop, showed them screenshots of the messages, photos, letters from a third person. I saw their faces change. First surprise, then an attempt to justify themselves, then panic when they realized that I knew every last detail. I spoke calmly, without shouting, without accusations. Just facts, evidence, a chronology of events. And the longer I talked, the more clearly they understood that there was no way back. Jason tried to justify himself, said that it was a mistake, that he lost control, that it all started with some strange game that got out of control. Kate was silent at first, then began to quietly explain that she did not know that it would go so far, that they did not think about the consequences. But I saw lies in their every word. I asked questions, I pressed with facts. I did not allow them to evade. They tried to change the conversation to emotions, to pity, but I held on. I saw their fear, and it was mine. The third person I learned about through text messages was also sitting across from me. He tried to explain that he didn't mean for things to turn out this way, that he was just watching, giving advice, but not directly intervening. I listened, but I didn't forgive. It wasn't about revenge, it was about the truth, about the closure I needed for myself. We discussed every moment, every meeting, every text message. I saw their excuses crumble under the weight of evidence. And at some point, I realized that I no longer felt resentment the way I did before. I felt power, the power they had been trying to take from me all year. I closed my laptop and said that this conversation was over, that there would be no more manipulation and lies, that I was taking my life back. They were silent, looking at me, realizing that I was no longer the same person I was a year ago. I walked out of the apartment, closing the door behind me, and for the first time in a long year, I took a deep breath. It was hard, it was scary, but a sense of control and honesty replaced the emptiness and anxiety that had haunted me all year. I knew there was still work ahead on myself, rebuilding trust in people, perhaps many months to let go of the pain. But now I had an understanding. I was able to face the betrayal, expose it, and no one else would be able to control my life. I and only I determine what my path will be. And for the first time in a long year, I felt that I could be myself whole, free, and strong.